So this morning I'd like to talk about something completely different, but related, of course. Everything in the teachings tends to feed into whatever one speaks about, because the path is a very integrated thing. This is the extraordinary thing about the Buddha's teaching. Everything fits in. And you realize when you, like before Christmas, we had a Word of the Buddha Sutta retreat. And you realize how amazing the Buddha's teaching is, that all his teachings fitted into the Four Noble Truths and that they sort of dovetail into them. The Fourth Noble Truth, the first aspect, is right view. That about the Four Noble Truths. So it all ties in. So this is the beauty of the Buddha's teaching. You don't get a feeling that there are bits and pieces missing or there's something that we're not quite clear about. But what I was going to talk about today, of course, is something I think is very relevant to everyone, and that is sickness. Anyone here never been sick? I'd love to see someone who's never been sick. Right. So I think we're all on the same page. And this came up for me, of course, because of my own recent experience, because I had viral gastro for about 5 days, which was very unpleasant experience. And but I was very fortunate in many ways because it was only diarrhea, not vomiting. And I don't, for people who've had gastro, of course, having both of them at the same time, really very ultra unpleasant. And a friend of mine who used to work in an aged care home, she said, this was the nightmare of the aged care home if gastro set in, because it would go through the whole of the aged care home unless they isolated, which they did. And she said it was a real, for the nursing staff, for the staff, it was a real headache looking after, cleaning up all these people all the time. So this, of course, is part of life, and I think it's so important if we can understand that, get a grasp on this from the point of view of the Buddha's teachings. And this was brought home to me even more clearly by some recent experiences that people related to me, actually. One of the people who comes here, his wife and another woman in Sri Lanka had operations that were only meant to be small procedures, sort of like not quite day procedures, maybe a day or two in hospital, but they went wrong. And of course, then they had to encounter all the problems with damage to the bowel, to the kidneys, to the bladder, and all this sort of thing. And one of the persons had about 5 or 6 operations in a month. That's just incredible. And the person in Sri Lanka, she said, from a very ordinary day procedure sort of thing, she ended up with a colostomy bag. And I thought, wow, how do you deal with these sorts of situations? I know the woman in Sri Lanka, I know her, so I know how she's dealing with it, and she's doing quite well with it, I feel. She might not think so, but I feel she is. But I don't know about the other woman, because it's very, very challenging when you have these multiple operations or multiple issues coming up, when sickness is really right there in your face. And it's very scary for people. And of course, it naturally makes one feel that this could lead to death. So it's so important how we regard sickness, the framework that we have for dealing with it. That is one of the issues that I'll look at today. And also looking at how we can look after ourselves in situations when we are sick. Because there are things that are helpful and things that are not helpful. And I think you've all seen this. And a big part of not helpful is the framework, the understanding of sickness. And sometimes people have some very negative views about why they're sick, or, and these things are not necessarily very helpful. So, and of course, when we have sickness, it's a crash course. I call it a crash course in reality because the nature of life is going to be, for all beings that live long enough, of course, old age, sickness and death. We hear this again and again in Buddhism. And I think this is something that comes with having a body. But the amazing thing is, I think this is extraordinary. Do you know what the Buddha calls these old age, sickness and death? Have you heard what the Buddha calls them? Anyone heard what he refers to them as? The divine messengers. Wow. Devadutas. Does anybody here think that sickness, old age, sickness and death are divine messengers? Wow. That's really quite a challenge to understand how you could think that these things were in actual fact, you could say, wouldn't you, a blessing. Now that's quite a ask. And in that teaching about the divine messengers, the Buddha talks about somebody who has passed away and they have this life review with yama. It's externalized, but I know Ajahn Brahm says he feels it's more like a life review when one reflects on what one has done and said and the way one has thought. And also the yama reminds us that, didn't you see somebody who was old? Didn't you see someone who was sick? Didn't you see someone who was dead? And you didn't think, when you saw that, a sense of urgency didn't arise that I must do good, I must speak well, and I must create good karma through my mind. And this is the reflection as a reminder to be a good person, to do what's important in life. Oftentimes in life, we're so busy dealing with life, we forget the things, the most important things. And the most important things, of course, is being a good person, a kind person, a generous person, all these things. But what makes us negligent, this is what Yama is asking the person, and the person says, I was negligent. I just didn't pay attention to these things, and so therefore I didn't do things that were good. I didn't develop my speech and my mind, my actions through my mind. And he says, actually it's really nice because he says, being a mature and intelligent person, you didn't. And of course, what makes us negligent? What makes us negligent? And this is was the same for the Buddha actually. And of course, the things that make us negligent they're great. It sounds great when you hear the word mada, in intoxication, like drinking. And what are we intoxicated with that makes us negligent? We're intoxicated with being young, isn't it? We're intoxicated with being young. And when you're young, I can remember when I was young, you never think you're going to be old. Now that is that reality-based? Obviously not. And I always remember when I was young, I used to see my grandparents and thought, well, they were always like that, weren't they? They were just born that way. It's obviously not true. And even then I thought, yeah, well, that's probably not the case. They might have been young, but I can't imagine it. And the same for me, I was young once. And so we get intoxicated with that, and we don't do the things that create good karma by body, speech and mind. But also one of the things, and this is relevant to sickness, isn't it? We get intoxicated with health, isn't it? When we're healthy, we never think we're going to be sick again. We thought theoretically it's possible, but we don't really entertain it too seriously. So this intoxication with health is another thing that blinds us to the nature of reality. And this is another one of the things that the Buddha awoke to as the Bodhisattva. Before he became enlightened, he realized, yes, I too am of the nature to grow old. I will not be young. And he was young at that stage. So he's very, very intelligent, very wise. And the same with health. He reflected that he's of the nature to become sick. And therefore, he gave up that intoxication. So therefore, he could start to see reality as it was. And also, what do you think the third intoxication is? I think everybody knows it. This one's the biggie. They're all biggies. intoxication with life, that we think it's like an open-ended experience. Life will go on and on. We don't focus on the fact that life has an ending. The body has an ending. It cannot conceivably continue forever. And if we're trying to find immortality for the body, I can't think of anything much worse than that, actually, much worse as the body grows older and older. But also there's a fourth thing that makes us negligent or think, well, this doesn't apply to me. And what do you think that is? Doesn't apply to me. Should give it. The wording gives it away, actually. Ego, exactly. One, yeah, exactly. We sort of feel like, yeah, maybe apply to other people, but to myself, no, not really. So ego is one of the big things that deludes us, deludes us about the nature of reality. And it's really important, as you would have gathered in the Buddha's teaching, when you hear this litany over and over again, old age, sickness and death, you must think, my goodness, isn't there anything new that they can come up with? Wait until we superseded those phenomena, I think. But these are actually where we can, this is our work, actually, for this life, to develop our wisdom, to develop our practice, to develop all those good qualities and kindness, friendliness. This is where we work. And this is a very practical experience. I think there's none of us that are not touched by sickness. Obviously, nobody put their hands up. Maybe they were shy. But everybody's experienced sickness. And of course, we've all experienced old age, either through a relative or we ourselves are growing older. I am growing older and experiencing the joys of getting older. So, and of course, death too touches all of us, with our family in particular, and also even for children with the pets. I think many people, they tell me how that really strikes home with the children when they see a pet die. So the point of this talk really is how best to deal with sickness and all these old age, of course, and with death. How best to deal with it. And of course, what is the Buddhist reply or the Buddha's reply? What do you think it is? It's really easy. No? The Four Noble Truths. Can't go past them. They're all about old age, sickness and death and all other types of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So this is really the teaching. This is something often too when we hear the Four Noble Truths, we don't think, well, maybe I could use it in my life, use these reflections, the nature of, is this suffering, is this unsatisfactory when we're experiencing difficulties, and what is the cause of it, and what is the cessation of that, the finishing with that, the ending of that, and also, oh, there we are, someone's alarm. And then also, what's the way to the ending of all this suffering or unsatisfactoriness? This we can use in our daily life. When you're having a hard day, you're getting a teaching in the First Noble Truth. This is dukkha. This is suffering. This is unsatisfactory. And this is an important way of looking at our experience, because most of the time, how do we look at experience, our experience? I'm having a terrible day. It has been awful. This has happened. That's happened to me. And it's always in terms of I and me and myself. And of course, when it's like that, it really hurts. It really is very, very painful, more painful than if we frame it as, yeah, this is unsatisfactory, this is suffering. Is a different way of looking at it. It's the way that will develop wisdom, the way that we can really understand life. And so this, because then we connect with the universal nature of difficulties in life. And of course, sometimes people think, well, isn't that a bit negative? But really, this unsatisfactoriness, this suffering, is what motivates us, really. When things are going very smoothly in our life, we don't care very much about things. We don't pay attention. But when things go pear-shaped, when they become very difficult, then, wow, we are motivated to do something about it. And so this is what the function really of dukkha, and the brilliance of the Buddha, that he could see the human situation, that life will never be quite the way we want it. If we do get it the way we want, we can be sure of one thing. What's that? It'll change, exactly. And I think everyone has had lessons in that. So this is, of course, pointing, the First Noble Truth is pointing to the nature of life, that this unsatisfactoriness is the nature of life. And where did it come from? Is it a big mistake? Is it some sort of planning error? Is it some sort of divine malevolence? That we have this situation. And of course, it isn't. It's due to a phenomena that we can all, you just mentioned actually, really change. Change is what drives these experiences of sickness. It drives all these experiences of unsatisfactoriness in our lives. And it's universal, and it's not about to stop. This is the nature of life. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha points to the fact that any state of existence will be impermanent. And that's quite a strong teaching, because people often cling on to the idea, must be somewhere that's not impermanent. Everything is permanent, stays the same. And of course, a lot of people, that idea, not really investigated, of course, is heaven. And heaven is impermanent too. And so it's looking for a permanent hangout, someplace we can be comfy for the rest of samsara. It's not really on offer, actually. So, and of course, in sickness, we can see the unsatisfactoriness or the suffering very, very clearly. It's so unpleasant, can be so painful, and so uncomfortable. So, and I know this friend in Sri Lanka, she's talking about her health issue. She said, that, I can see anicca and I can see dukkha, theoretically, but non-self? She said, wow, no, not at all. You know the theory. And I think this is one of the things. We can know the theory, but somehow it can't change how we're reacting, where we're coming from, because it hasn't gone deep enough. It's not our wisdom, as it were. It's our understanding, intellectual understanding for sure, and it's a good framework to have, and it makes a big difference to the way we frame illness, the difficulties that we experience in life. But non-self, of course, is seeing that that things are happening due to cause and effect. It's a process of body and mind, and it's that we aren't. This is interesting, the owners of this body and this mind. We can't say to the body, don't be ridiculous. I've had enough gastro, thank you. Finish now. Anybody do that? Anyone here can do that? Good luck if you can. You're doing well. So, and the same with the mind. Sometimes people may think, well, yes, this body may not be mine, me, myself, and I, but the mind is. But then, when we have these emotions that take us on this roller coaster ride, or we have thinking that's going non-stop that we prefer not to have, can we say no to it? No, thank you. Not now. That's enough. You can say it, but of course it will make no difference at all. So, and some of the ways we frame sickness too important. Because sometimes people say, is it caused by bad karma? Do people think it's caused by bad karma? Do you think it is? You know, when we get sick, especially if it's something serious, people may think, oh, it's probably from karma, something I did in the past. And of course, we can't really know that that is the case. And I think there's no problem with thinking like that if you find it a positive for you. But if you find it a negative, and many people will, oh, you know, you're the one who caused this to happen. You know, maybe it was a previous life and you don't remember it, but you're getting the results of it. That may not be helpful for a lot of people. And there is karma in the sense of we all have a body. If you have a body, what's going to happen? It's going to get sick. It's going to get old and it will pass away. But of course, for us as Buddhists, the thing that we really focus on is the mind, developing the mind. That is what we can liberate. That is what we can really lift up, transcending these problems of the body, of old age, sickness and death. So of course, karma is our intentional actions by body, speech and mind. And I think you can say in some ways karma can cause some of our illnesses, because some of our actions, and I think just ask you to reflect, you know, do some of our actions lead to our health problems? I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they do. I've seen it for myself. And sometimes we think of karma as something exotic coming from past lives and everything. But karma is action. It's action here and now by body, speech and mind. And are these causes or conditions for sickness? Quite likely. For instance, you know, if we eat things that we know will bring health problems, will bring up issues that we already have. If we are diabetic and we start tucking into the donuts and other unsuitable food, we get the consequences. The results are pretty obvious of that action. And the same with smoking and drinking. All these things, you know, when you go to a hospital, isn't it? They ask you, do you smoke? Do you drink? They don't ask you, do you take sugar? Interestingly. And of course, the other aspects of karma too is speech, you know. And when we're sick, you know, there is some of the conditions that lead to sickness are some of the inner speech that we can have towards ourselves. It can be so negative, and so and create conditions that are quite good for bringing up sickness, actually. And you see the way our inner speech affects our minds, and this is the karma of the karma we're creating through our minds, and it can lead to a lot of stress. Anybody relate to that? The mind getting really stressed. One of the mantras that I hear in my mind, and I hear most people's mind run on, is so busy, too busy. That's usually it, and this is like a stress mantra, really. And of course, when we're stressed, do you think it's easier to fall sick, to develop different health issues and experience different sicknesses? And of course, the other big things, other mental states that feed actually stress too, really, and illness is fear, anxiety, worry, even anger. You know, when people get really angry, their stomachs get really disturbed and the body gets very, very disturbed. So we can see in one sense, this is a much more practical sense of karma actually affecting our health. And there are things we can do about it, of course. You know, stop drinking, stop smoking, and stop taking sugar if it's a problem for us. So it's good to see that these causes and conditions are here and now. It's not some divine being that's metering out this suffering, which I think that is not a helpful idea one bit. I don't know. Anybody find that a helpful idea, that they're being punished by a god or whoever? And also, sometimes people, Buddhists, and they can find this helpful, they can think that their karma, by experiencing this pain, that they are reducing their negative karma. And that may work for them. They may think that may be a positive for them, and that's okay. I don't necessarily agree with that, nor with the Buddha actually, because he said that idea is more like a Jain idea of burning off karma by experiencing pain. And this is what the spiritual practitioners at the time of the Buddha, in fact the Buddha himself as a bodhisattva, tried, experiencing extreme pain in order to extinguish all their bad karma, all the negative karma. And the Buddha said, it's impossible to do that. Don't start that way. Don't continue that way. And of course, he found the middle way, didn't he, between this torturing the body, experiencing incredible pain and discomfort, and also the other extreme of indulging the body. So it's the job and the First Noble Truth. What's our work that the Buddha says we have in the First Noble Truth? He mentions it in the setting in motion of the wheel of Dhamma, his very first talk, his very first teaching, that's the word. What's our job in relation to dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, suffering?
Is it recognizing?
No, getting close. That's a bit further down the track, number 3. It is to fully understand it, fully comprehend it. And this is something so important that we really understand the nature of sickness. And this is, if we can really fully comprehend it, we're well on the way to being enlightened. And so I'd like to ask everyone, how do we usually handle sickness? How do we usually handle sickness? Go to the doctor. That's quite a good idea. Good, yep. Any other ways? Take a rest is good. These are all positives. Take medicine, good. Sorry? Oh yes. I think I'm a big believer in food as medicine. Actually, I don't always follow it, but I think it's very good. Yeah. Do you think many people, the way they deal with it is to distract themselves? I think distraction is number one, actually. When people are in pain or discomfort, they tend to want to distract themselves. Look away from it. Get some distance from it. And, of course, distraction, if we're doing it consciously, if we know we're doing that, that is fine. But for most of us, when we are distracting ourselves, it's just a knee-jerk reaction to the aversion of feeling discomfort, pain, all these unpleasant feelings. And so this is one way that people can use, and it can be skillful at times. As I say, if we are very conscious that, I'm just going to take my mind off pain, because when we focus on the pain or the discomfort, it's going to lead to aversion. So that can be skillful if we know we're doing it consciously. The other thing that happens, and with that story that I told you about the 2 women, this was probably more likely to happen, though I didn't hear either of them have said this, blaming others or ourselves, in that situation when the operations didn't go well. I'm not quite sure for what reason. You could blame the doctors, you could blame the staff, or we can we often blame ourselves. We think, well, I shouldn't have gone for the operation, or it's my fault that I did this and that, and this blaming. And do you think blaming helps at all? Nope, it doesn't one bit, but we're pretty much addicted to it. You see the news, and the number one activity that occurs after something dreadful is, who's to blame? They try and find someone to blame. But really, what is the cause of sickness? This is a biggie. What do you think the Buddha said the cause of sickness is? Did I hear? Birth, that is right. Yeah, absolutely, birth is. Virus in the case of gastro, yes. The immediate causes for a sickness can be many, but the real root cause is birth. And this is what the Buddha, he reflected actually on the night of his enlightenment. He was reflecting, he had actually become the Buddha by then, was reflecting on it. And he could see that birth was the condition for being able to experience all this. And of course, many people will say, big deal. Because here we are born already. But the point of the Buddha's teaching, the whole point really, is for us not to do it again. But we're very likely to do it again. That's the trouble. We will very likely repeat it. And one of the wonderful teachings, you see it in the Girimananda Sutta, when the Buddha is talking about the danger in existence. It's called the Ardinawa, and he's talking about, and it's this phenomenal list of sicknesses you can get. And you know, the sicknesses at the time of the Buddha, exactly the same as now. They're really the same, even cancer and all these things. And he's pointing to the fact, this is the danger in having a body, that it will always be subject to these things. And if we take rebirth, of course, that will be again and again and again. And I liked one of my favourite sayings from, any of you remember ex-Ajahn Jagaro? I think some of you will remember him. He used to have a lovely saying that I really resonated with. Have body, will trouble. It was actually a take-off the name of from a TV series, actually, I think. So there we are. So really, when we look at, if we fully understand, if we fully comprehend the First Noble Truth of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness, suffering, we will be encouraged to practice, to finish with getting reborn again and again. And in the process, of course, experience a lot of happiness and joy along the way. So the second noble truth, of course, is, anyone know what the second noble truth is? Yep, cause of suffering, origin, exactly, yes. And what is the origin of suffering? We all know. Did I hear tanha? Craving, wanting, that's it. And of course, that you can wonder, how does that apply to sickness in that case? Where does that tie in with sickness? And of course, does anyone here enjoy sickness? Anyone really get into it? Have a great time? No? This is interesting. And of course, what happens is when we are sick, there is, what state of mind usually arises for most of us?
Wishing we're not sick.
Exactly. What do you call that? You could call it, yeah. Sorry? Aversion. That's what I was thinking. It is sort of vibhava tanha, but not quite so extreme. But yes, because it's natural, isn't it, to be averse, to be resistant to pain, to discomfort, to unpleasant feelings in the body. It's very, very natural. Does it help? Does it help the process? When you're sick, if you say, I don't want to be sick, I don't want this pain, I don't want this discomfort. And of course, we can reach for the Panadol or whatever, and we'll do our best. But does it help when we resist? And of course, it doesn't usually help one bit, because if we resist and we have aversion, what does it lead to in the body and the mind? When there's resistance, when there is aversion, how does that affect our body and mind? Tension, exactly, tension. And so whatever we're experiencing, the discomfort, the pain, whatever it be, it will be more intense because we're adding a lot of tension to it. Oftentimes people who have chronic pain, you've heard of people who 24/7 pain, they can't get away from it. And they always, the teaching that comes from that experience is that the worst part of chronic pain, what is the worst part of chronic pain? It's the resistance to it, the aversion to it, the feeling that this is going to go on forever. And that just completely, crushes the person. And so this is really where we can make a difference, where we can work with the mind, dealing with that resistance and aversion. And of course, there's a lovely saying, I think many of you know it, that the Buddha spoke to the Nakalapita. You might have heard of Nakalapita. He's in the suttas. He was an old man. He's supposed to, Pita is the father of Nakala. We don't know who Nakala was, but we know his father and his mother. And they were pretty impressive lay practitioners, particularly his wife, Nakala Mata. She sounded like she was a stream enterer, really amazing. But he said to Nakalapita, even though your body may be sick, may your mind not be sick. So that's our job too. May our minds not be sick. When the body gets sick, that's as it is. But if our minds get sick on top of it, wow, we call that, what do we call that? Double dukkha. Double dukkha. And so our job is, in terms of the second noble truth, what did the Buddha encourage us to do? The second noble truth, this is the work we have. He outlines, in his first teaching, he outlined the Four Noble Truths and what action is required for each. First, fully understand, fully comprehend. Second, sorry? Yes, that is letting go. Letting go or letting go of what? Wanting, yes, wanting and craving. That's it. Letting go of the origin of suffering. And when we do, actually I think most people have experienced in their lives when they've got a big suffering and this letting go naturally happens. They've understood something. Then this feeling of peace comes, release comes, when this acceptance comes. And that is the letting go of this wanting, this fighting, resisting the nature of what we're actually experiencing at the moment. So this acceptance that we can develop, of course, comes from two things, and I'm going to talk about the next thing, hopefully. Getting close. From understanding the nature of life, that is very, very important. And I think this is something that can help us not get lost in being sick, not get lost in being suffering. We know we have a framework for understanding it, a framework for digesting it. But the second aspect, and this is very important when we're sick, is the emotional aspect. The emotion of kindness and caring is so important. It is a medicine, absolutely. And I witnessed this when I was sick, actually. The kindness actually made more difference than the medicines, actually, the physical medicines. It's extraordinary. And we used to have, before the days of bulk billing, we used to have what they called doctor's bedside manner. And they would come and speak to you, and of course what they do is soothe you and relax you, and they give you a comforting talk. And this would help. This would be a medicine that actually helped a lot of people. But now, I'm sorry, that's a 15-minute consultation, maybe. Long consultation, yes. Can go for a bit longer. It's not on the agenda so much now. So our job for when we are in sickness and when we are in pain is to bring up this sense of soothing and kindness and caring for that pain, for that discomfort. And some people may think, well, that sounds impossible. That sounds really impossible. But it isn't really. if we've, I use the example, if you've stubbed your toe, if you've damaged your toe and it's bleeding and painful, you can soothe it. You can put medicine on it and everything. You can rub it and do whatever you. But this caring and attention is a big, caring and kindness is a big part of that medicine. And I think all of you probably had your mothers or fathers kiss it better when you've hurt yourself. Isn't that bizarre? And what's more amazing is it works. Isn't it extraordinary? You see that with young children too. They kiss it better and the crying immediately stops almost. So it's quite a natural reaction to pain and discomfort, is to soothe it, to give it this care, to look after it like we would if we were a mother or father looking after a child. Our child is this body. Our child is this mind, actually. So this is what we can bring to it. And of course, when we do that, that curtails or it reduces this aversion, this resistance in the mind. And when that happens, of course, then the experience of pain and discomfort, disease, is reduced. So this is quite a natural way, just to use this sort of natural tendency to soothe or to have this kindness, friendliness to whatever painful experiences we have in the body. So this can be a very, very useful way of dealing with pain. And of course there are other ways that we can use mindfulness. We call often, I know in Mahasi tradition they call it Dhamma therapy, using mindfulness, giving attention to the body. And this is usually, I would say, kind attention is the best one. And attention to mindfulness of the feelings that are arising, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, the states of mind that are arising due to that illness, and also reflecting on it in terms of Dhamma. And that also turns illness around in a sense too, because we're now investigating, we're now looking at it rather than being completely absorbed into being sick and painful feelings. So this can be very helpful. And of course one of the big things that is good is to create good karma is a great thing when we're sick. And I know for this woman who was having the multiple operations, that's the immediate thing that came to my mind was, create some good karma, because it just felt like, something that had a momentum of its own. And to make good karma when you're sick is not easy, but her husband was doing his best, which is great. But one can do it through the mind, through our speech, to be, for when we're really sick, to be very appreciative of those people that look after us, that are kind to us. We're completely dependent on them. This is something people don't like. This is one of the big teachings of old age, actually, is being dependent, and we don't like it. And also using our minds to bring up this feeling of gratitude, of appreciation for what others are doing for us. And this is such a gift for ourselves, but it also can be a gift for those that are looking after us. So there we are. And the third, just finish off, the third noble truth, of course, is the ending or cessation of the origin of suffering. I don't think that's going to happen when you get sick, actually, because that is, of course, enlightenment and the experience of Nibbana. But we can experience some of the peace that comes from letting go. That does, the release that comes from letting go, resisting, being averse to that sickness, to that pain, coming to acceptance. And of course, the fourth noble truth is exactly how we can do all this. And as I mentioned, the way we frame sickness, this is right view. Where we're coming from, this is right intention. Kindness, friendliness, caring, compassion for ourselves and others. And then right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, looking after our minds so that they don't become negative, and developing more positive states of mind. And using our mindfulness, and then samadhi too, the last one, stillness, So this whole noble eightfold path is to take us beyond sickness, old age and death. That's the point. That's the great news, I think. And we can use these divine messengers. I call them the wake-up calls, really, the wake-up calls. Be alert to them for ourselves so that we do good by actions, yes, of body, speech and mind. This is what we can do. And we can do that by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So I'd like to finish the talk there, which is about dealing with sickness in the best possible way, and in terms of the Buddha's teaching, using these Four Noble Truths in our lives. So useful, and they reduce the suffering, the unsatisfactoriness that we experience in life, and can bring a lot of happiness to the mind as well. So I'd like to finish there. So, sadhu. And if there are any questions, comments or complaints, just what they say, too much old age, sickness and death, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the talk today.
Yes.
We're just going to alternate between the physical audience and the online audience. So for those on Zoom, as you can see already one's put their hand up. We'll start with the physical audience here in room. Does anybody have a question?
There we are. Go for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Ajahn, thank you for the talk.
Yeah.
That was really informative. I was just going to ask, does the Buddha consider the hindrances and the fetters sickness?
Oh, that's Did the Buddha consider the hindrances and the fetters, the samyojana and the nivarana? Yes. Yes, they are sicknesses of the mind, really. They are sicknesses of the mind, because the true health of the mind is without those states. And of course the Buddha mentions that without those states, what condition is the mind in? Do you remember what the Buddha says? Without those negative aspects of the mind. He says it's radiant. That's the natural state of the mind, when it hasn't got these negative qualities. And that radiance is exactly what people experience when they have deep meditation, because they're experiencing these often as bright lights. That's not the only possibility for a sign, but they're experiencing the brilliance of the mind, the radiance of the mind, without these negative qualities. So yes, they are sicknesses of the mind for sure, Mark. So I think it's a very good way to see them. And of course, the fetters. These are for people who are not familiar, the fetters, the samyojana, are those things that bind us to getting reborn again and again. And there's 10 of them. It's quite a lot, isn't it, really? And the first one is the one that people think is actually their greatest joy, self-view. A view that there's an I, me, and myself in here. And that is number one fetter. And that's really the kingpin for the whole of the 10, really. And then also the fetter of doubt about the path, about the way to enlightenment, and also rites and rituals, seeing through rites and rituals as a means to get for experiencing enlightenment. And then, of course, the giving up of sensual desire, it's attachment to our 5 sense experience. That's very natural. And also aversion, giving that up. And then the 5 higher fetters. These are for someone who's on the 3rd stage of enlightenment. So it's sort of right ahead of us, actually, a long way up, is attachment to the experience of deep meditation, the jhanas, and then the immaterial attainment. These are extraordinary experiences of happiness and bliss. And then also a sense of conceit, that the I conceit, I am better than others, I am worse than others, I am the same as others. This is the conceit. that even at the third stage of enlightenment is there, lingering, as the example, the simile is like the fragrance in a flower. It's very subtle, but it's there. And then, of course, restlessness and ignorance, the last one. But the ignorance of a person who's at the third stage of enlightenment doesn't compare to what we have. We've got a truckload. They've got a thimbleful. Not much anyway, they don't have very much. And then that's the 10th fetter is gone. And so those things, they are like diseases for the mind and sicknesses that are overcome, and then the person reaches complete health, you could say, and that's the Arahant, the fully enlightened one, fully awakened one. So I hope that answers your question, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Ajahn.
Yeah,
I just
rather long.
Yeah, no, that's a very categorical answer. I was thinking about the sickness in a modern context of mental health.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
yes.
and just relating that to those, and I haven't seen the Buddha exclusively say that they are sicknesses yet. So thanks.
Yeah, they a lot of them are more like papancha, you might say, papancha. The Buddha says, if you look at the Honeyball Sutta, talks about how from having the senses we experience feeling and perception that drives the world, and then we think about what we've experienced, and then from that thinking, then all this chain of other what do you call it? Diversification, other possibilities comes up. We have for instance, we might have an unpleasant experience, and then we think, oh, it's because I said to him last week that he shouldn't do that, and then he did this and he did that, and you get this chain of almost craziness actually in the mind. You can witness it, this papancha. And the Buddha says that one of the qualities of Nibbana is nipancha. It's without this, without all this proliferation. That's the word. It just goes. You can see the mind do that. When you do see that, it's always good to think, hang on. This is getting a bit far-fetched. You feel the mind is really, just taking off and going in a direction that's leading to more defilements, actually, and less contact with reality, actually, and coming from this proliferation. All right.
Ajahn, we've got a question online from Zoom.
Oh, Zoom. Hello, Zoom. It's good. It's the last time. It'll be YouTube, though. YouTube continues, so that's good.
Okay, Greg, you can ask a question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
So Ajahn, thank you so much for your teachings. They've been such a blessing for me.
Oh, good.
When you were speaking about the first noble truth, that dukkha is to be known, to be understood,
Fully.
I think one of the things that makes this so difficult for me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, is that distraction is so present. Like we all have these in our pockets, and it's so easy to just pick up the phone whenever we feel the least bit unsettled. You want to watch a YouTube video, you want to watch a cat video, whatever it is. And I think because of that, I think there are two things. One, we don't really delve into the suffering and understand it and feel it deeply. And if we don't feel it deeply, we'll never want to be free.
Yeah.
And so I think about all the teachings that you give, and when you say that we can't use willpower, we have to use wisdom power.
Absolutely.
And so when I feel that craving and that pull, I try to think to myself, okay, I'm not picking up the phone, but in doing so, I'm going to be more free. And then I try to feel that freedom.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about how we can use wisdom power to help let go of our addictions.
Right. No, that's a very good reflection, actually, that you said, and I think everybody can relate to it. That we often, reach for the device, that's what they call it these days, the device, instead of dealing with things. And of course, one of the biggest things that is unsettling for people is, what do you think it is? It's sort of the big bogeyman, really, of... No, it's related to restlessness. They're very connected, in my mind, this state. It's what everybody hates to be, the experience that they run away from in big droves. We all run away from it if we can. Stillness. Not stillness, no. Suffering, yes. What type? There's so many flavours on offer. Boredom is the one. That's the number one, actually. It's driving most of our lives. You know, we just get, as you said, you know, if a little bit of discomfort, then we reach into the pocket and get the phone out and, you know, watch the cat video and whatever, you know. That's quite wholesome, really. Other people may not go on such a wholesome trajectory. So what wisdom power really can help us is where it can help us is to know that we're doing that. If we're conscious of it, that's quite a different experience from most people who are just, it's a knee-jerk reaction, you know. Feel a bit sort of bored, restless, don't know what I want, or it's not this, it's not that, you know, and then looking for something to distract oneself. So distraction is something that we use, and we can use, as I say, with pain, with wisdom, you know, in the sense that we know we're doing it and it takes our mind off that pain and the discomfort for a short time. So really the wisdom that helps us in this relationship, in relating to this, is of course the Four Noble Truths, you know, really just seeing in our own experience, this is suffering or this is unsatisfactory, really seeing it for ourselves. And I know you're saying, well, how do we use wisdom to do that? And of course we do that through, you know, understanding that the reason I'm experiencing this is because of impermanence, because of change. It's it's always happening. And in actual fact, when we reflect it's going to change, it should, if it goes to any depth, we should be able to accept things a bit easier and think, well, it doesn't matter. So what, I'm bored. It'll change. But we don't think like that generally. And especially when we're sick, there is a very strong feeling, this is forever. This is forever. And then we feel really desperate. But of course, understanding the nature of reality is really big time, is where wisdom power is developed, from seeing change, seeing its relationship to creating unsatisfactoriness or suffering in our lives, and also seeing, and this is where the person in Sri Lanka said, this is a tough one, seeing that when we take it personally, it really hurts. It really hurts, and we don't really understand it. So this is our job, really, is to look into these three characteristics of existence and to really tap into them. At a theoretical level, it will help to a certain extent, but it won't touch the feeling level. So the feeling level always has to come with metta and with kindness, compassion, all these things. But of course, you know, the other thing that is really if you frame your experience of sickness or whatever in terms of the four focuses of mindfulness, satipatthana, that can be very helpful too, because you're just exploring, you're interested in what's going on here. And that curiosity is very, very useful. Also the attention, when we pay attention to the body, really pay attention. We don't really give much attention to the body. Then the body can really respond and heal. But also when we also look at the feelings that are driving us, this is the important motivators in our lives. Chasing pleasant feeling, go for it. Get away from unpleasant feeling. Neutral, forget about it. And then also reflecting, using mindfulness to see the states of mind that come up in relation to our experience. And the most important one, Dhammanupassana, viewing the whole process of body and mind from the point of view of Dhamma, the Four Noble Truths, the hindrances, understanding the wisdom aspects, the insight aspects into the 6 sense bases, into the 5 aggregates of the body and the mind. So all these things can help us, the way we frame it. And I think this is very, very important, to take the sting out of things, is when we start to look at, investigate, rather than see it, rather than be it. We're often being it, and we pay the price of being it, which is usually quite painful for us. So thank you. I don't know if that answered your question about wisdom power, but hopefully that sort of addressed it. Because wisdom power is the whole point. It is the path. It is. There's no doubt about it. And it changes everything. Once the understood experience changes everything. So thank you for that question. That's great. So there's one more question at the back. I think it will.
You mentioned about mindfulness.
Yes.
Just one.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Factors of the noble path.
Is that Pauline?
That mindfulness. Are we going to be mindful of the delusional nature of breathing? And is meditation, which is encouraged by the Buddha, the only way to purify our karma? Can we actually view every aggregate that we inherit from our impure karma is also delusionary? Even a feeling of tiredness and pain, is that also part of the mindfulness of delusion, viewing them as delusionary?
Right, thank you.
Even our breathing phenomena is also delusionary.
Delusionary.
It's part of...
Right, yeah.
It's part of the 5 aggregates.
Yes, part of the 5 aggregates, that's true. Is that Pauline, is it? Yeah, I think it is, yes. I didn't know you were here. Welcome to Melbourne. There we are. Just to say, of course, mindfulness of delusion is it's an oxymoron. It doesn't work, because if we are mindful of something and we understand it, we're not deluded. So delusion is such a big part of the process. I agree 100% with that, that's for sure. But to be mindful of delusion is next to impossible. If we were, we could really easily uproot it, and we can't. The whole function of delusion is really to be invisible. It's interesting. It's easier to see other people's delusions than our own. Sometimes it can be quite stunningly obvious, if somebody is very paranoid and they're saying all these things, you think, oh yeah, all right. And you can tell what they're saying is contrary to reality that is broadly experienced by others. So a lot of things are not necessarily delusional, Pauline. Even the body the experiences in the body not necessarily delusional. They can be. They definitely can be influenced by the way we look at them, and coming from the delusion of I, me, and myself, then incredible fear can come up, and all these sorts of negative mental reactions can come up. So it is true that the process of delusion is going to give us misleading understanding, in a sense. But the way to go beyond delusion, it's the only way, is through meditation and through reflection, the power of meditation, power of reflection. Really, this is it. Because, Pauline, if our minds are still very impure, there's a lot of greed, hatred and delusion, any of the 5 hindrances going, we're not going to see much actually that we don't see normally. We will just see things as we usually do. We won't see things as they truly are, the nature of reality. So we need a clean screen, need clean glasses in order to see clearly. And once we can see clearly, then we've got the potential to go beyond a delusion. And this is one of the big strengths of very, very deep meditation, is that the purity of mind that's required to enter deep meditation means that what we're experiencing is not going to be deluded as much. It won't be deluded by the defilements, the negative aspects of the mind. So we can actually see clearly. But that's the prerequisite. We need to clear the slate of the defilements, the negative states of mind, in order to see beyond delusion. And seeing, of course, is the first stage of enlightenment. This is, call it, is where the eye of vision arises, the eye of Dhamma arises. The Chakku Dhamma, Dhamma Chakku, arises when a person sees the nature of reality, and they see that there isn't an I, me, and myself in here. And what a relief, great happiness, big party. And also they know for a fact what the path is now. They've seen it for themselves. They've seen the Four Noble Truths, they've seen the dependent origination. They know the process, they know the path. And therefore they're not taken in by any rites or rituals that say, yeah, hang on, you do this for 3 months and you'll be enlightened, or whatever. No, they won't be taken in by any of that. So that vision, that seeing, comes from not being deluded. And that takes quite a bit of clarity, of purity of mind. So thank you for that question. I hope that sort of answered it a bit. It's a big question. So thank you. And I think we have to finish off here now. So for those who would like to, we can pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha.
Thank you, Ajahn. Apologies to those on YouTube. We didn't get to your questions today, but you won't have to compete with Zoom from next week.
Maybe tomorrow night.
But tomorrow night, yes. And feel free to come next door and join us for the community lunch. Thank you.
Right, that'd be good. Oh, that's nice. Polian. What a surprise.